All right, let's dive in. We've got a story for you today that kicks off inside the cab of a truck, but believe me, it has huge implications for the technology in all of our lives. So picture this. You show up to work one day and bam, there's a new camera staring right back at you from your dashboard. That's exactly what happened to UPS drivers. These inward-facing cameras just appeared. No warning, no instructions, no training whatsoever. So you can bet the drivers weren't happy. They filed grievances right away. And this wasn't just about privacy, Big Brother's watching. This was a serious safety issue. They argued these things were a constant, dangerous distraction on the road. Okay, so what does distraction even mean here? Well, imagine trying to navigate a huge truck through traffic while this little box is just constantly tripping at you. Drivers were getting hundreds of audible alerts a day for things that were completely ridiculous, like lens cap obstruction, just because they flipped their sun visor down. I mean, they said it was driving them absolutely crazy. And look, we're not talking about a few hundred trucks here. This is a massive issue. The company that makes these cameras, Lytx, has installed something like 2 million of these devices in commercial vehicles all across North America. 2 million. The scale is just staggering. But then the whole story takes this really sharp turn. It all started when one driver, a guy named Eric Johnson, got a pretty critical tip from a colleague over in Salt Lake City. And the tip? It was simple, but it was also seriously alarming. It turns out these cameras use infrared light to see in the dark, so they're constantly beaming this invisible light right into the driver's face. All of a sudden, this wasn't just about an annoying distraction anymore. This became a really serious question about health and safety. Now, this is where it gets really, really interesting. You see, infrared isn't inherently bad, right? It's used in medicine all the time. But look at the difference here. In a hospital, you're exposed for maybe a few minutes and you're wearing protective gear. Truckers, we're talking 60, even 70 hours a week of constant, unprotected exposure. And get this, it's often inside a dark truck cab where their pupils are wide open, letting all that light right in. Okay. So now they have this really serious health concern on their hands, and they do exactly what you'd expect them to do. They turn to the two big institutions that are supposed to have their backs, their employer, UPS, and their union, the International Brotherhood of Teamsters. And this right here, this just perfectly shows the wall they hit. They did everything by the book. They filed a safety grievance, they contacted the safety committee, the technology committee, even the union's industrial hygienist. And what happened? Calls went unreturned, they were ignored, or worse, they were just flat out told, you don't have a case. A total dead end at every single turn. So after getting shut down by everyone who was supposed to help, they realized something pretty stark. They were completely on their own. And that's when a small group of these drivers decided, fine, we'll do it ourselves. So since no one else would step up, they decided to get the answers for themselves. They actually crowdfunded $5,800, chipping in from their own paychecks for one single purpose, to get one of these cameras scientifically and independently tested. Yeah, exactly. This wasn't some big, well-funded campaign. This was a totally grassroots effort. They literally had to pass a hat around, Just a handful of drivers chipping in because their own institutions just wouldn't act. It's pretty incredible. But even then, their path to getting these answers was just full of roadblocks. They first went to NIOSH, that's the Federal Agency for Occupational Safety, but their investigation got paused because of a funding cut. Can you believe it? But they didn't give up. They took matters into their own hands again, sent a camera to a top-notch lab, and finally, they got the hard data they were looking for. So the lab results came in, and for the very first time, these drivers had objective scientific proof right in their hands. The game was about to change. Now, to really understand what the lab found, you got to know about this one thing. It's an international safety standard called IEC 62471. Just think of it as the official rulebook for protecting people from radiation hazards from lamps and things like that. And here's the kicker. UPS itself claimed its cameras followed this exact code. And folks, this table is basically the smoking gun. So UPS admits the camera is what they call a risk group 1 device, which sounds low risk, right? But here's the thing. The safety code for that group says there's no acceptable exposure limit for people who are photosensitive, meaning they're extra sensitive to light. The code also recommends you don't exceed 8 hours of exposure, but these guys are working 10-hour-plus shifts, and maybe the most important part,
The code specifically warns about people taking super common medications that can cause photosensitivity, a warning that was never, ever given to the drivers.
And this is why this is such a huge deal. We're not talking about some obscure medications here. The safety code is warning about risks for people taking things like aspirin, ibuprofen, common antibiotics, even heart medicine. The potential risk was right there in the rulebook, but the warning to the actual drivers, it just wasn't. So, armed with actual scientific data, what started as just a workplace grievance has now blown up into a full-on federal case. The drivers' fight is still going, with open investigations at major agencies like NIOSH and OSHA, the country's top workplace safety watchdogs. And this could end up setting a massive precedent for millions and millions of other workers. This whole thing started with one camera in one truck, but it really ends with a huge question for all of us, doesn't it? As this kind of AI-powered surveillance creeps into our workplaces, our cars, and even our homes, who's responsible for asking the most fundamental question of all? Is it safe?